In this video, we're going to learn to craft some 2D motion using a free website called Piskel, Piskel. So you can just search that in Google, or you can click on the link inside of D2L to open this up. So Piskel works best if you create an online account. It's completely free, so you'll see that I've just tied mine to a Google email address. And that allows you to save some of your animations as a gallery. And in this gallery, you'll see I have stuff like my little dancing robot, a walking pig, and an explosion, and even a little icon for myself that smiles, because I like to smile. So let's spend a little bit of time making a simple animated GIF inside of Piskel. So I'll go to Create Sprite, and it'll open up the Piskel editor. You'll see that right now the color is set to black, so let's get a little bit of color in here. Let's maybe do this faint blue. Now, I'm currently set to the pen tool, which will just allow me to start drawing that blue on our screen. Up here in this top corner, you will see an example of what the actual animation will look like when you're done. Currently it's set to full, which allows me to see it closer. Yours may be set to 1x, which means it's really tiny. You can just mouse over this and say full in order to see it a little closer. Keep in mind the actual size of this 1 pixel to pixel is this 1x size. So we're creating a little bitty tiny piece of art. So back to full so we can see this. Now we have our pen tool. We also have a paint bucket tool. So if I draw an enclosed shape, I can use that paint bucket to fill it in. We have an eraser tool, which allows me to just erase those pixels. And for most of these tools, we have an option along the top that will change the size of that object. So if I click up here, now the shape that I'm erasing with is much bigger. And it allows me to add or remove more pixels at a time. So I'm going to just start off by creating a ball. So let's create something like this. A nice start to a ball shape. I don't want to make it too big, but I also don't want to make it too small. And I'll use my eraser, maybe go down a little bit on size to kind of start trimming off some of these edges and rounding it up a little bit more. So there's a couple of other tools that allows us to either darken or lighten these pixels. So if I go down here, you'll see this lighten tool. If I click it and just start clicking on my ball, you'll see it creates a highlight on the top of that. If I hit Control Z, it will undo it. If I mouse over that, you'll see it gives me a couple of other tooltips. If I hold down Control, I can darken instead of lighten. And if I hold down Shift, it will apply it only once per pixel, which means if I hold down Shift, instead of it going completely to white, it'll just add a little bit of a highlight there. If I hold down Control, you'll see it starts getting very dark, but if I hold down Control and Shift, it'll just give me a little bit of a shadow along the bottom of this ball. Now, this is okay, but maybe I wanted to start with my ball a little higher. So that's what this hand will do. This is our move tool. So if I select the hand, I can move my ball up. You'll see that there's also a couple of other options for this move tool. So I want to animate this ball sort of bouncing on the ground. So I could go and add a new frame. And when I do that, you'll see that now it's playing an animation. It's playing the first frame and then the second frame, but the second frame is empty. So really we're just getting this flashing dot. And that was a lot of clicks to recreate that dot again. So I could just go in here on this frame and start trying to draw a second blue dot and get it close. And I mean, that wasn't too bad for the first effort. But that's going to take a lot more clicking than is absolutely necessary. So let's just go ahead and delete that layer. And instead, I'm going to duplicate our first frame. So now I have a second version of our first frame. And what I can do is use my hand tool, my move tool, on this second frame just to lower the dot a little bit and start getting some motion on it. Now, I want this to go all the way to the ground and squash. So let's duplicate it again. One more time. And you'll see it kind of freezes now. Again, I'll continue to lower it. Maybe like that. Let it pick up some speed. I'll duplicate it again and lower it some more. And so right before it hits the ground, I want it to start stretching a little bit. So I'm going to use my eraser tool to kind of start erasing off parts on the side to make it thinner. And I'm going to use my pen tool here to start elongating it a little bit. So I want it to sort of be touching the ground. So we're starting to get this stretch shape out of it. Again, I can erase more if I need to. And in order to get some of that shadow and highlight back in there, actually, let me go ahead and fill this in with the color. And then I can use that shadow highlight tool again to add in some shadow along the bottom and some highlight along the top here. So that's looking a little bit better. Now, the next image I want is actually the opposite of this. I want it to feel squashed out on the ground. So that's a big change. I'm just going to create a completely new frame. I'm going to kind of draw out my squashed version of the ball. There we go. So you can kind of see that squash that's happening on the ground there. And again, I'll use my lighten and darken tools to go in here and get a little bit of a shadow on this and a little bit of a highlight as well. Now I want it to feel like this just kind of plays in a loop. And rather than reanimating all of this again, what I'm going to do is just start duplicating all of these frames again. So I'll have 2 copies of each of these frames. And that makes it play slower because it's playing at each frame twice. But what I can do now is rearrange these frames in order to get a reverse version of my down animation. There we go. And so now we're seeing a better loop cycle of this ball bouncing up and down. Now to save this animation, all I got to do is click the save button and it'll allow me to save it to the gallery. So we'll call this bouncing blue ball. And I'll hit save to our gallery, or save to my gallery. Now to get this out as a GIF, I'll have to use this export button. Now again, recognize that the actual size of this is this. This is how it would look on our screen if I just exported it. We're zoomed in really close, but we're drawing 1 pixel at a time on our final GIF. So if I want to see this at a more appealing size to view, then I'm going to have to scale it up when I export. So I'll click on this button here to export our object, and you'll see that by default it'll be set to 1x, which is the actual size we're seeing here. And that's 32 pixels by 32 pixels. I'm going to scale this up to maybe somewhere around 7x, maybe even 8x. Yeah, 256 seems pretty good. And I want to make sure loop repeatedly is set to on and that the GIF is set to on. Now recognize there's a couple of other ways we can export this in order to get a sprite sheet for a video game or something like that. But if I hit download now, it's going to allow me to download this as a GIF. And When I open this, this is the image we'll get. Now you'll recognize that it's not gray around the object, it's just white, and that's because all of these other areas in this image are not colored at all, and so they are going to be transparent. If I were to put this on a colored background, I would see that color all around the ball. So GIFs have a transparency map, and you can use that in a lot of neat ways.